If the universe of Subnautica has a hell, then without a doubt, it's the lava zones. Consisting of both the inactive lava zone, ranging from 900 to 1300 meters deep, making it the second deepest fully explorable biome in the game, as well as the actual deepest, the lava lakes, topping out at 1500 meters, this entire biome is characterized by striking hues of red and unbelievable temperatures and danger. Both of these two areas are actually the final two you travel to in the first game, and as such are full of some of the best lore in the entire series, but also sport an intensity unlike anything else. Even traversing these zones can prove extremely difficult, as temperatures can reach as high as 75 degrees Celsius or 167 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who love freedom. And this means usual go-tos like the sea moth cannot survive due to the heat levels and levels of pressure so deep underwater. And on top of this, to even swim around yourself, you will need to have the most advanced and upgraded reinforced diving suits, and taking the Cyclops or prawn suit is a must. Once you actually get inside though, there is a strange beauty to these hellish biomes that really make them shine. In the inactive lava zone, for example, you will be met with miles of open cliffs spewing molten lava, along with solidified chambers of magma that illuminate your surroundings like the inside of a furnace. There are lots of unique things to find here too, like the lava larvae or magmarangs, fish that have evolved to embrace the heat rather than being cooked by it. And on top of this too, this is the biome where you can find the great sea dragon Leviathan, a colossal reptilian creature that is housed by a dark green fortress of a body that seems to separate the sea with every move it makes. The Leviathan uses its arms and tentacles to propel itself forward through the lava zone at great speeds, and if you get caught out by one, your only hope is to run and pray. But just when you thought things couldn't get even more intense and awesome, depending on the type of person you are, if you manage to make your way through the inactive lava zone, you finally find yourself in the finale of the game and one of the most memorable biomes in Subnautica history, the lava lakes. While much smaller than the inactive lava zone, and thus for many people not quite as grand, it makes up for this lack of size with absolutely breathtaking views. Giant walls and lakes of lava blanket as far as the eye can see, with obsidian pillars and magma formations creating vast geological structures to wade your way through. The heat and brightness here is so powerful that your skin will immediately melt into your bones if you are not properly protected, and spending any more than mere seconds in the fiery infernos all around you will result in a swift death. It's the quintessential example of how to make a player feel powerless in Subnautica, and is the perfect culmination of everything terrifying you've seen up to this point in a final zone that makes all others feel like they were just a warm-up. Not necessarily because this zone is the scariest, but because it's the most fearsome, most ferocious. But the thing is, I think what really puts this biome over the edge into my top 5 favorite biomes in the entire series is that it's also home to the primary containment facility. This gargantuan research base, also known as the Emperor Containment Facility, was originally constructed 1,000 years ago by the precursor aliens or architects, who in their desperation to find a cure to the Carabacterium outbreak that was killing their species, found the Sea Emperor Leviathan, a species that looks very similar to the sea dragons and is the single largest living leviathan we have seen yet. The precursors took special interest in this hulking beast because of its resistance to Kara, meaning the Sea Emperor is likely the key to solving what could be the most evil force in the entire universe, that can wipe out entire hyper-advanced civilizations all on its own. It's such a fascinating concept not just because it's cool in its own right, but because it finally puts all the pieces together for the main story that most players have been going through for hours up to this point, and shows that oftentimes the most interesting bits of world building happen in the most dangerous kinds of places. And overall, it's hard to argue that the lava zones in Subnautica aren't something special, a place that feels so foreboding yet too enticing to not engage with. And in a way, isn't that what every amazing Subnautica biome does? That being making a place that is daunting yet exhilarating at the same time. There's something about the Lilypad Islands in Subnautica Below Zero that just feels right. It's an extremely green biome, ranging from the surface of the ocean all the way to 340 meters below, and with that depth also comes a lot of width. And that's because the Lilypad Islands make up a huge portion of the southeastern side of the map, and as such are adjacent to the thermal zones and East Arctic. But while these adjacent zones are cool by themselves, in my opinion, nothing compares to the majesty of the lily pads. In this biome, you can find a dense and rocky seafloor dominated by plant life of all sorts, spewing green particles and algae into the water accompanied by rolling plains of seagrass. By far and away the defining feature of this place, though, are the lily pads. These gigantic circular leaves float at the top of the water's surface, and even allow players to climb on top of them, and below these heads of sorts are massive veiny trunks that hang deep into the waters below. This means that as you swim around the Lilypad Isles, you will constantly be met with rays of sunshine beaming through the gaps in the lily pads, as you make your way towards huge swaths of land held up and suspended in the middle of the ocean by the lily pads above. It's a striking scene for sure, and because of all of the moss, algae, and grass that is produced in the area, also a very vibrant one. And more than any other zones, the Lilypad Islands really feel active. And that's because there's a huge variety of animals to analyze, including squid sharks, spinnerfish, glow whales, featherfish, and most annoying of all, the sea monkeys, who literally will bolt towards you underwater if you are holding a tool and attempt to steal it right out of your hands. If you manage to avoid these pesky, almost mermaid-looking degenerates though, you can make your way to the sea floor, where you will find hundreds of decaying lily pads and ecosystems bustling with action. Here too you can uncover a handful of small openings in the rock faces and trenches that give way to the Lilypad caves, which are labyrinthian in nature and sport an ominous green glow that implies the region may be overrun with Kara slowly eating everything alive. But the true intrigue of these caves isn't actually found here, but deeper, all the way 600 meters underwater, where you can traverse through the large tunnel networks and make your way inside the famous deep Lilypad caves. Seemingly untouched by the green mossy death above, this large split-level cave is heavily illuminated by its flora, most prominently the grand cotton anemones, which are bioluminescent flower bulbs that shine bright pink connected to a very thick dark green stem which twists as it grows upwards. This gives the entire zone a very unique and distinct feel that you can't get anywhere else in the Subnautica games. And from a community standpoint, it's also a lot of people's favorite, most zen place to go to build a base. And it makes total sense too. It's such a breathtaking biome all on its own, and above it lies the Lilypad Islands, which are also established and great in their own right. And this all comes together to craft a sort of alien world full of twisting cave networks and wide open oceans with massive handfuls of land just floating in the waves. It's atmospheric, colorful, teeming with life, and overall just such a cool environment that is the type of thing you didn't even know you wanted until you actually see it for yourself. And when combined with the deeper and especially dark lore implications of the zone, of a disease that has taken hold and will soon destroy the entire planet, it's hard not to feel completely immersed every second you swim around these waters. One of the most important aspects of Subnautica's success, and the biggest reason I love it personally, is just how unbelievably atmospheric and tension-driven some of the biomes can be. The kinds of places that make the hairs on your back or neck stand up, or your eyes lie wide awake in awe. And in terms of zones of influence like this, without a doubt, none do it better than the blood kelp zones. Composed of both the blood kelp trench to the southwest of your starting life pod, and the northern blood kelp zone found between the mushroom forest, underwater islands, and mountains, both biomes are recognized by their distinct lack of light and overgrowth of blood vines. These very tall and thin plants emit an ominous white glow from their stems, and will oftentimes be the only thing you can see in front of you, as the northern zone can get as deep as 580 meters, while the trench extends all the way to 675 meters at its apex. This means that much of the life around these parts has evolved to survive in extremely delicate and harsh conditions that lack sunlight, thus resulting in monstrosities that pull lots of inspiration from the deep sea creatures in our real lives. For example, in the northern blood kelp zone you can find the ghost leviathans, blighters, and crab squids, translucent bulbous sacs of flesh that have 4 eyes attached to a squid's torso, almost resembling an alien with a massive brain. Stumbling upon these things at depths like this can be a terrifying and disorienting experience, especially when the only thing to keep you grounded in the utter darkness are the small plants you can find or random cave networks that reveal a treasure of resources. But you see, no atmospheric biome like this would be complete without some music to back it up. And the blood kelp zones in Subnautica specifically actually have some of the best and most eerie music in the entire series. It makes it so every second you spend here feels like your last, and in the trenches specifically, at many points you will feel like you have become lost or that the game might have crashed because it really feels like you are down there alone and scared. Combine that with the fact that the sea moth and prawn suit can struggle to navigate the tight spaces in the southern zone, which is literally one massive trench with rock bridges spanning from one wall to another, and you wind up with an almost paralyzing sense of terror, but in a good way. And it shows just how tense and amazing this series can be at times, where the blood kelp zones are once again another biome that taps into that sense of thalassophobia within all of us, making you afraid of what could be out there in the darkest portions of the ocean, hiding away from prying eyes. To me, it's everything that a Subnautica biome should honestly be. Full of mysteries to uncover like large shipwrecks or small floating islands, terrifying monsters that are fully unique to these zones that can't be found anywhere else, and a distinct feeling of being on edge the entire time you're here. So much so that it's seldom you find players in the Subnautica fanbase who don't love this biome, even if they can barely stand being in it. Because even if you only spend a little time here, it leaves a resounding mark on you and becomes the type of biome that will live on in your memory forever and make all of your friends want to try it too. While the world of Subnautica thus far has been a host to countless breathtaking environments and biomes that all feel grand and unique in their own ways, maybe one of the actual best is a place that never saw the light of day in the first 2 games, the single cell landscape. You see, this rumored biome was actually cut mid-development of the first game, and while developers have come out and said that it was a real planned location at one point, all we can go off of for now are a few hints and this single piece of concept art. The zone itself was supposed to be a completely dark biome. This black and gooey protoplasm would have reacted violently to all light that hit it, quickly forming domes of alien substance around your ship as you had to turn off your lights and ramp up your speed to maximum. The terror in this place would have been unlike anything else we've ever seen in Subnautica, and likely would have been so scary that many players would have quit the game outright upon getting here. But along with this too would have potentially been some lore on creatures and histories outside of the precursors and Kara, diving into even more ancient beings that could have survived on this planet that were composed of a dark sludge substance even more powerful than the ocean waters around it. And I can't express just how awesome and horrifying this idea is. It's the kind of thing I really hope the dev team brings back for Subnautica 2 towards the end of the main campaign, as a sort of last place we need to go to unravel the mysteries of the series. You could even include new forms of plant life that are gooey in nature, or animals that have learned to survive with no light trapped in a hell with this monster. Maybe you could find hundreds of gargantuan leviathan skulls that imply a great war of sorts before, or even shipwrecks from precursors that date back millions of years. The possibilities truly are endless, and it fits right into the theme of discovery for the whole series and would add a huge layer of variety. So while we may never actually get to see this biome in game, I still believe in my heart that a future title could include it. But even if they don't, just the idea of what this could be, the potential, means it's one of my favorite biomes in Subnautica history. But you see, we still have one place left. One that not only is a fan favorite of the series, but the single greatest biome in Subnautica history. A big part of what makes Subnautica such a special game series is that every single biome is unique and special in its own way. Whether that's zones full of utter darkness and molten lava, or otherworldly locations where entire islands float underwater and form ecosystems all to their own. However, there is one place, One biome in Subnautica that rises above them all and creates an environment so beautiful, so atmospheric, full of lore, and tantalizing that it is without a doubt not only a fan favorite of the series, but the single greatest biome in Subnautica history, the Lost River. Found via 4 entrances spread across the map, including the Blood Kelp zones, Deep Grand Reef, mountains, and the Bulb Zone, the Lost River itself is a frigid and deep cave biome, ranging from depths between 550 and 1,000 meters deep. And on top of this, it's split into 7 different sub-biomes within. And this makes the Lost River not only one of the largest zones in series history, but also far and away the most diverse. One second you might be making your way through a massive corridor full of crab squids and pyrocoral, and the next find yourself in the bone field, surrounded by the skeletons of monsters far greater than anything we have ever seen alive in game. But we'll get to that. First of all, almost everywhere you go in this zone, you will be blanketed in a strange and ominous green toxic mist. This isn't just for show either, because this green tint you see everywhere in the Lost River actually comes from the presence of highly toxic green brine pools, which release chemicals into the water that make it very unlivable for most forms of life, and create the large crystalline sulfur outcrops we can find in the zone. Just like in our real-life oceans, sulfur settles at the lowest points in water, due to the fact that it's more dense than the molecules around it. But you would be sorely mistaken if you thought it was the only resource in this haunting place. Because in actuality, the Lost River is home to the most diverse set of resources and life in the whole game. If it's minerals you're after, you will be happy to find things like gold, diamond, nickel, ruby, silver, lead, lithium, ghostweed seeds, gel sacks, and titanium or uranite deposits. In terms of animals, in the waters of the Lost River, there are schools of many unidentified forms of fish, along with baby ghost leviathans and their mothers, bleeders who are parasitic worms that attach to your skin and suck your blood at an alarming rate, or the spinefish who look like living zombies who are translucent down to the bone and swim aimlessly forever. And all of these things come together to make the entire zone feel alive and lived in, despite how toxic it comes across at first. And as you swim around this biome, you will be met with countless massive rock structures, huge stalactites that have very strange shapes that almost make them look like they were formed by an intelligent creator rather than ocean waves. And if you swim towards the ocean floor, you will be blanketed by a thick green must that hides the sand and rocks beneath it, and might be home to some of the secrets we still have yet to uncover in the games. Because there are 7 distinct biomes as well, there is so much to see and do. For example, in the Ghost Canyon, a large passageway featuring multiple caves and tunnels that branch out all into one huge canyon of sorts, you can find the ancient skeleton of a bone plate leviathan, a hulking sea slug that looks like it crawled across these floors thousands of years ago, presumably before brine had taken over. In other areas like the Ghost Forest, you can wade your way through miles of ghost rays and weeds, which have a bright blue shine of light that emits from their branches and paints an evocative scene in the dark and foreboding place that the Lost River is. And maybe most interesting of all of these sub-biomes is the Tree Cove, a luminous room with a single giant cove tree in the middle that is surrounded by a swarm of ghost rays swimming around it in an almost religious fashion, basking in the blue and purple hues that make this place stand out against the rest of the larger biome. At the corner of the zone 2, you can find the mountain regions, which include a giant sea dragon leviathan skeleton on a hill, and even more importantly, the famous disease research facility. This enormous abandoned and destroyed precursor alien base was once thousands of years ago home to some of the most twisted and heinous experiments in this planet's history, where the architects would capture innocent underwater creatures and restrain them to small rooms or against walls, where they would inject the horrifying Carabacterium into their bodies directly to study the effects. These helpless animals would scream and whine as the water around them diluted the sound waves, and Kara began to take hold of their bodies, creating massive green pustule sores that consumed them from the inside out. And for years, this tragedy continued on as the apex alien precursors tortured everything in sight, until one day, a humongous sea dragon leviathan, in an effort to save its own kind, collided into the research facility, causing a massive rupture and releasing the Carabacterium into the wild, where it would go on to slowly kill the entire planet. It's a horrifying reminder of the tragedy of the Subnautica main story, and goes to show just how dark and twisted things can really get in this universe that otherwise looks cheery and happy. But even more interestingly, it makes us beg the question, what was the Lost River? What was planet 4546b like before all of this happened? And the reason this question is so prevalent in the Subnautica community is because of the Bonefield subbiome that I mentioned earlier that's also in the Lost River. As you would expect from the name, it's in this biome that we can find the single greatest secrets and mysteries that the universe of Subnautica has ever seen. Giant gargantuan super leviathan skeletons that are so large that even a single head of one of these creatures dwarfs the Cyclops, the biggest vehicle we can make in-game. You can travel for hundreds and hundreds of meters following these skeletal remains, and by the time you reach the end, you quickly realize that you are only seeing a small part of the body, as most is now hidden under the green death of the zone, buried under miles of sand that has moved atop the bones over thousands of years. And even more terrifying, we know from some fossil dating and lore finds that these skeletons are actually juveniles, baby gargantuan super leviathans, meaning the full adults would presumably be so massive and insane they wouldn't even fit on our screens trying to look at them standing miles away. And that means that these skeletal remains all imply that at some point these oceans that we are exploring in Subnautica were home to much bigger and much more fearsome apex predators that had teeth larger than our entire bodies. But these findings only beg more questions than they answer. For example, how on earth did creatures this large find themselves in a cave network like this? Sure, don't get me wrong, the Lost River is extremely expansive and one of the biggest caves in the entire game, but it certainly isn't big enough to even house one single monstrosity like this, let alone many. So could it be that thousands of years ago the entire biome was much different? Maybe instead being a massive open portion of ocean? After all, we do know that the inactive lava zone and active lava zones are just below the Lost River in-game, so it would make sense that after such a long time span, potentially world-altering amounts of volcanic activity could have terraformed the region into an entirely new place, and the skeletal remains could simply be lost artifacts to that time. This theory begins to break down though once again when we notice that the bones left behind by the gargantuan super leviathans are in very pristine condition to have survived that long, meaning something a lot more crazy must be at play here, but as to what that is, your guess is as good as mine. But really, regardless of what the actual answers are, to me, the Lost River is by far the greatest biome in Subnautica history, one that has literally everything you could ask for. It's massive and teeming with unique life forms of animals and plants you can't find anywhere else. It has a huge handful of smaller subbiomes that all have their own spin, some of the craziest lore and best research facilities in the entire game, grand mysteries that make you wonder about the past of the planet and the future of what we could possibly see in other Subnautica games, and a general visceral atmosphere that makes the entire biome feel extremely immersive. I cannot stress enough just how great this single location is. And as hard as it was deciding where to put every other biome on this list, and quite honestly, I could go back and switch a couple spots depending on the day, I knew from the very second I started researching and working on this video that the Lost River would be number one, because there simply isn't anything else that captures the same sense of magic quite like this biome does.